Hi everyone, and welcome to our group presentation. Our group will discuss alternative energy choice to the fossil fuels, especially for generation fast reactor. We are focused on the first generation fast reactor in particular. These video graphs show present-day carbon emission, and you can see in the green circle that Angola has just recorded 458 parts per million, the highest on record. That was last week. My name is Jadu. There have the 5 major parts. Here is a job description of our presentation. Nuclear power is a no carbon source of the energy because unlike the coal, oil, gas power plants, nuclear power plants particular do not produce CO2 during their operation. Nuclear reactors generate close to the 1/3 of the world's carbon-free electricity and are crucial in meeting climate change goals. You can see there from the PowerPoint history of the whole nuclear energy system developed from the generation 1 in 1950s to generation 3 in 2020s. Generation 4 is the latest development of the nuclear energy system. Is more advanced and device design than making nuclear plants not only less expensive but also inherently much safer by incorporating new reactor technologies. These 6 reactor designs that will be delivered safe, secure, sustainable, and versatile nuclear technology. Generation 4 reactors are characterized by their coolants, which can be the water, helium, liquid metal, or molten salt. However, the reactor operates at a very high neutron energy.
In terms of energy conversion efficiency, nuclear energy is very efficient energy. Also, the first generation of nuclear technology does not require new uranium resources, because energy already exists to fuel the entire plant for millions of years. So from the figure 1, we can see less surface area required for nuclear than other renewables. In comparison with wind and solar alternative energy technologies, nuclear requires about 1/10 less than the area. For solar, 1 gigawatt requires 50 square miles of borders land. The existing and mainly used hydropower, wind power, and solar energy all face seasonal problems and are greatly affected by climate. However, nuclear power can achieve high power and stable energy supply, which is not comparable to other renewable energy sources. Nuclear energy requires a relatively small surface area and a low ecological impact, and importantly, is meltdown-proof. Does not cause loss or damage to the environment during construction, operation, and post-processing. And the only potential is the occurrence of nuclear leakage accident. For example, if we want to build a hydropower station, massive valleys and farmland will need to be liberated, which is an ecological disaster, and the result will screw the geological structures. The footprint of wind farm is very large. A 1 megawatt wind farm will require nearly 600 square kilometers. Although nuclear power also has risk to the environment and large amount of river water is required, strict remediation practices are in place. But first-generation nuclear power can recycle historical nuclear waste, making it almost completely efficient. Whilst the nuclear radiation is harmful to health, the new technology has very little waste that remains and has a much shorter half-life in the order of 100 years instead of 1,000, making it much more manageable.
Unlike fossil fuel-reliant power plants, nuclear reactors do not emit carbon dioxide while operating. Thus, they're immediately more appealing than CO2 contributing fuel sources such as coal. As you can see from this graph, nuclear power is the second biggest avoider of CO2 emissions behind hydro, despite its share of the electricity market decreasing, and it damages the environment far less than flooding the limited number of suitable valleys which hydro demands. In the entire lifespan of a nuclear power plant, there are associated CO2 emissions. The construction of the plant itself, like any power station, requires a large amount of metal and concrete. If you use fossil fuels to get the energy to build the plant, the CO2 emitted in production is part of its life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. However, once you have the plant up and running, you are no longer reliant on fossil fuels, and through use over time, it becomes a carbon-neutral energy source. Warner and Heath conducted a review a decade ago, showing life cycle greenhouse gas emissions from nuclear power has been a fraction of traditional fossil fuels, and technology has only improved since then. Often cited concerns of CO2 emissions for nuclear plants are uranium mining and nuclear waste. However, current nuclear technology is far ahead of the public's understanding. Fourth-generation sodium-cooled fast reactors have a closed fuel cycle, significantly reducing waste streams and using uranium far more efficiently. Fourth-generation plants may also burn existing nuclear waste to produce electricity, such quantities of which already exist to provide fuel for millions of years. This decreases CO2 emissions from waste storage and removes the need for uranium mining. With worldwide electricity demands poised to rise significantly in the next 30 years, nuclear is by far the cleanest and safest technology available to reliably meet the baseload electricity demands of Australia.
I am now going to talk about the feasibility for nuclear power in Australia. This graph from BP's Statistical Review of World Energy highlights that there has never been a nuclear power plant in Australia due to nuclear prohibition in all states. Australia has access to vast areas of land as well as the third largest known uranium reserves globally, standing to make significant profit. So why aren't we using nuclear energy? Money, politics, infrastructure, socio-economic attitudes and fears, indigenous resistance, technological ignorance, and a massive educational gap are all contribute to an overall lack of incentive for nuclear power in Australia. This is primarily a result of the economic and political role of the fossil fuel industry. So how does Australia's nuclear future look? At present, there are almost 200,000 jobs in the fossil fuel industry, but looking ahead, investment into nuclear power creates a transition and long-term replacement of skilled labour. Looking at Australia's LNG market, we are not in short supply of a short-term cleaner energy than coal. Stutzer et al. 2021 have shown that the approval of the Adani Carmichael coal mine in 2019 was aided by the pro-coal narratives in the Courier Mail. However, collective public sentiment on Twitter and events such as COP27 have diverged significantly from the media's narrative, bringing free thought to the public. Thirdly, lack of infrastructure for nuclear power is a small obstacle, and an obstacle that Australia has already just overcome to secure its fleet of nuclear submarines to counter China's growing military influence. Coal-fired power stations would need to be repurposed, but the energy transport infrastructure is in place, as G already mentioned. Fourthly, disseminating public ignorance and fears is easily done through investment in education, research and development, and fostering the success and attitudes of our Commonwealth nations. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the UK has signed a deal to build 8 new nuclear power plants. There is a general negative association in Australia with nuclear weapons testing in the 50s and a lack of awareness about new fourth-generation nuclear technology. The public and policymakers have lost track of where the risk in technology is right now. For example, does the public know that fourth-generation nuclear reactors are meltdown-proof, even if hit by a tsunami or earthquake? The risk of nuclear disaster has been almost completely mitigated. The fear is in the public's memory. 10,000 cancer deaths a year from coal is not as memorable as a death from a nuclear disaster, which averages out to once every 33 years. Fifthly, a quick Google search reveals organizations such as Beyond Nuclear Initiative and even Greenpeace who lobby against nuclear in Australia, despite the Greens party being pro-nuclear. It is clear that a massive investment of time and effort from pro-coal narratives of the Australian state are far-reaching and hold strong influence over opinions in remote regions. Finally, coal mining lobbyists have also succeeded in cutting off funding supplies to universities and research and development into nuclear technology. Only one university in Australia offers postgraduate education in nuclear science, and only one nuclear reactor exists at ANSTO, which is used primarily for medical research. So it's apparent that there is an overabundance of fossil fuel lobbyists and a public who have lost track of where the risk in technology is right now. But the reality is that replacing our coal dependency and the baseload electricity demands of the Australian nation will take around $1 billion and 10 years to build. If a deal is signed today, we will not see the first nuclear power plant until 2035. So do we keep using coal until then? No, well, in the short term, we need renewables. In the meantime, it is clear that Australia is happy to dump nuclear waste from other countries and mine uranium for military use in nuclear submarines and weapons, but not for clean energy. So in summary, Australia is extraordinarily well suited to implement nuclear power generation. IPCC climate model predictions for Australia show that we need to stop our dependency on burning fossil fuels now. Sea surface temperatures are rising and extreme weather events are becoming the norm. Nuclear is a feasibly long-term solution in Australia, but the short-term solution requires investment in nuclear R&D, reducing the gap between policy and science, a change in public and policymaker attitudes, and short-term alternative renewables such as wind and solar to bridge the energy gap. Australia was pro-nuclear, but then Fukushima happened in 2011, and a public opinion poll by Bird et al. 2014 showed a complete reversal on those for nuclear in Australia. Since then, improvements in nuclear technology and safety were made such that it is now the safest and most reliable option the world has today to curb carbon emissions. A study by Owen et al. 2011 concludes that none of these inhibiting factors are insurmountable with new fourth-generation nuclear technology, provided that the Commonwealth helps to dissolve Australian public opposition to the virtues of nuclear technology. And finally, ending on a positive note, it is becoming apparent that regular resurgence in media and political discussions are indeed doing this, which has in part been spurred by recent conflict and the goal of severing dependency on importing majority energy needs. Thank you for your time.